Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Head to their website, fullpresscoverage.com, for other great podcasts and articles. You can also check out this podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, and on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JetStryer. I'm the one with the cool set behind me. Sap is the one with still no set behind him. I'm going to just keep teasing you until you decide to put something behind you there.
Yeah, we're still working on it. I'm maybe going to put some really nice pictures back there, or you can get a virtual background, which I'm going to work on.
Like space, outer space, is that what you're
out of space, or maybe the Zakem Bridge, like everybody uses for Boston.
Staples Center
for the Lakers, yeah, or just a giant picture of LeBron in the crown. I think that would be a good background for me.
Was that giant backdrop they had in Cleveland on that building that was like a witness? It said it was just like a huge thing. Maybe you could buy that. I'm sure it's in storage somewhere, and
it is
probably bigger than your whole building.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I wouldn't be able to fit it. It looked like something out of Land of the Giants. I'd be like this little tiny person, which I've never been a little tiny person, but with that mural behind me, I think I would. Behind me, not Muriel.
Muriel.
That's a cigar or a woman's name.
That's an old-fashioned woman's name, right? You don't meet many Muriels these days.
No, not at all.
So, how to transition into this? I was trying to think, could I do a good transition into Jrue Holiday getting 4 years and $160 million? No, can't. That's just a news story. That's just a news story, Stap. Jrue Holiday, Milwaukee Bucks have their big three for the long term. It's Giannis, Chris Middleton, Jrue Holiday. 4 years, $160 million max contract extension for the guy that they acquired for a couple of first-round draft picks this past offseason. He comes from New Orleans. He's been an all-star, I think, once in the NBA, is a great two-way player, a great leader. Everybody seems to love Jrue Holiday. Does this contract make sense for you?
It's a lot of money, right? He's 31 years old, so he should still be at a very high level for the entirety of this contract. I mean, he had some injury concerns this year, but the team is so much better with him than without him. When he doesn't play, they're about a 500 team. When he does play, they win 72% of the games. So obviously you can see the difference. I still wouldn't call that a big three. I think Giannis is a lead dog, even though I have questions about that.
That's what they're calling it, Sap.
They're calling it a big three, but it's kind of like a big one with 2/3. You understand? I don't think they have a real true number two. I don't even know if Giannis is a number one. I mean, his numbers are. He's won back-to-back MVPs, but at the end of the game, do you really trust Giannis closing? I mean, his offensive game is unstoppable as it can be, is somewhat limited. But Milwaukee had to do this. They can't get free agents, the Bucks, and they traded a lot to get Jrue Holiday. So the alternative was let him walk or sign him. You had to sign him. Now, the numbers, and look, I'm big supporters of NBA players. Get every last dime you can. No one's putting a gun to the head of the owners. Someone puts a piece of paper in front of me and says 4 years, $160 million. I'm signing it no matter what's on the paper, what I need to do to fulfill that contract. So I never push this against the players, but man, one all-star game, a really good player, but I don't think a difference maker. He can be if he's the third or fourth guy on your team, but if you're asking him to be the second guy, I don't think it's going to work. But what was Milwaukee supposed to do? They had to sign him, but man, 4 years, $160 million. It just goes back. And again, I don't want to sound like a cranky old guy, because again, I support the players in all of this. Willie Mays, one of the 2 or 3 greatest players in the history of baseball, played 22 years in Major League Baseball, made a little over $2 million. I know that was a long time ago and times have changed, but I'm sure a lot of the great players of yesteryear would say right now is, damn, I should have been born 20 years later, because I'd be getting that money.
Really, it's remarkable that the great players of yesteryear, as you said, they were compensated at their time. It looked like they were making good money. Maybe not in the 1930s or 40s, because they were working two jobs. A lot of those guys who play baseball. But since the 60s, the athletes have been making decent money, and now they're making incredible money. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of them wish that they were born later, but that's why it's it's on the unions, and it's on the leagues, and it's on the players to take care of the guys who came before them. If they can.
Absolutely.
Too. And I know it's not easy to give money away to people you've never met before, but that's that's an important thing to do. Is these guys, a lot of them have, medical bills that are difficult for them to pay. Whereas guys now, and like Jrue Holiday, will never have to worry about paying a medical bill again for his kids or his grandkids or anything like that. So it's a completely different thing. As far as the actual contract, I think that's what he would make as a free agent anyways, honestly, Sap. So I think it's a good deal for Milwaukee. The question is, if you're going to question anything, it's that why did you cash all your chips in for Jrue Holiday as opposed to maybe trying to get a better player? Should you have maybe waited a little bit longer and tried to cash in your chips for James Harden and get that trade instead of a Jrue Holiday trade? Was that there for you? I think that's fair.
That's a really good point. And I remember when Harden was available and it appeared that Houston was going to trade him to the Eastern Conference because then you don't have to face him if Houston ever gets good again. By the time Houston gets good again, James Harden will be retired and probably already in the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Dead. He'll be dead.
He may be. We may all be dead at that point. But just think of Harden with Giannis and Middleton. That would be phenomenal because I think.
Yeah, they'd be incredible. They'd be the finals favorites.
They would be because Giannis is a unique player, but in some ways a limited player. I don't think you should run your offense through him. I like when he's able to cut, and who better to hit him than someone like James Harden or Chris Paul. I thought in the offseason, Chris Paul going to Phoenix was a good move for Chris Paul in Phoenix, and we see that it has been. The Suns are playing outstanding basketball. Yeah. They seem to be locked in as the 2 seed out west. But, Chris Paul on Milwaukee would have been better than Middleton and Jrue Holiday.
Yeah.
I think, he's a better player. He's more of a force multiplier than Jrue Holiday. Holiday's a good player. I'm not taking anything away from him. But that would have been maybe a better move, and you probably wouldn't have to give up as much as you did to get Jrue Holiday. Obviously, you couldn't have got both because then salary cap ramifications would go through the roof. But look, this is what they had to do. They can't get free agents in Milwaukee, so
no, it's not going to happen.
You had to sign him, and his contract is a little more than what the Celtics signed Kemba Walker for. Holiday's a better all-around player, much better on the defensive end, and he's bigger. Again, how many times have we said this? These small point guards don't last long. And Kemba's 5'11", and now is breaking down, can't play back-to-back games. The knee situation. Holiday is 6'3", 205, strong guy. So
if Marcus Smart could be a more consistent offensive player, he'd be Jrue Holiday.
Similar, yeah. If he had the type of shooting that Holiday gives you, the overall acumen on offense, which I think Smart's a smart offensive player. Just he has no fear in shooting, multiple three-pointers every quarter. So, yeah, but similarities, especially on the defensive end. Holiday's a sensational player. And you know what? This is where the league is. The TV contracts keep going up and up and up. There's plenty of money to go around. So God bless the players for getting it.
Similar to what I said when the Hornets signed Gordon Hayward, it's like if you can get – this is different because they acquired him in free agency and Holiday they got via a trade. But with these smaller markets where you can't really typically attract free agents – sometimes you have to overpay, and I think they overpaid for Hayward, Charlotte, and I do think that the market would have bared out that Holiday would have gotten a similar, if not the exact same contract in free agency. And like you mentioned, Seth, they're not getting anybody to come to Milwaukee, so they sort of had to do it. They're in win now mode. Giannis is in his prime. They have to try to surround him with as much talent as possible. So I think Holiday is a great player. I think he's a really good fit on the team. I do agree with you that him and Middleton strike me more as the third best player on a championship team as opposed to the second. So, maybe if their philosophy is, hey, if we can just add a bunch of third best players on a championship team, it'll even out to a number 2. But I have no problem with what they did here. And I think good for Jrue Holiday for getting paid. As I think, like I said, Sap, the only criticism I would have is that, and maybe they didn't even know this was a possibility, was that if they had held out a little bit longer, they could have offered a very similar package for James Harden as to what the Nets offered. And Harden and Giannis, you're talking about a championship team. Holiday and Giannis, you're talking about possibly a team getting to the finals. I feel very confident that Harden and Giannis would have gone through the East and been able to either beat or compete with the Lakers in the championship. So
pretty much wherever Harden was going, they were going to become the favorite because you're getting a top
could
6
argue
or 7 player.
You'd have the
Any
best
team he went
offensive
to.
and best defensive player on the team.
Exactly. And I think they'd work well together, although I know Giannis kind of had disparaging things to say about James Harden going into last year's All-Star break, and
the same
vice
thing.
versa. Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah, because Giannis was saying Harden never passes the ball, and Harden's like, I've led the league in assists, and oh, by the way, Harden's leading the league in assists this year, so I don't know what the
Harden
narrative
said,
is.
I'd like to do everything without being able to shoot. I'd like to be able to dunk everything too.
Yeah. I mean, which the other night, I believe Giannis went 18 for 21 from the floor, and there's only 3 misses from 3. I mean, he's kind of almost like Shaq as far as being dominant around the basket.
Yeah, he is.
Because there's not a lot of rim protectors like there were when Shaq was playing, and he doesn't necessarily set up in the post. So he's not getting the physical abuse that Shaq had. When he gets going to the basket, it's just like, get the hell out of the way. But as we've seen in the playoffs, you build that wall, and now he's limited.
Yeah. And I think that's what Zion's going to sort of run into also until they let him loose and start shooting threes, or he feels more confident taking threes. Because if you watch Zion and Giannis play, they're actually playing a very similar game right now. Is that they're just bullying people and trying to score in the paint and getting ahead of steam. And they can both do it, but you need to have a more varied game. So I think Milwaukee did miss an opportunity getting Harden. It may not have been their fault because at the time they just may not have known he would have shake loose a month later. But I still think they're going to be a very tough out in the East, and I'm not going to write them off and say they can't win, because the past 2 years have had the best record in the NBA. This year they're right around there, so maybe they can. And they certainly can't without Jrue Holiday and trying to figure out something in free agency with a different guy. It's just not going to happen. So they need to stay as good as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can because of the market, and because even though Giannis just signed an extension, you can see that doesn't really mean squat in the NBA. James Harden had 2 years left on his contract. He forced himself out. So anybody can shake loose as long as they have the mindset to do it. So Milwaukee has to be hell-bent on trying to be as competitive as possible. So
gotta keep selling it. Yeah,
you got to keep selling, and got to keep selling Giannis and keep spending over to the salary cap to show him that you're actually trying to do it. So they're a small market team, and that's what small market teams have to do. Small market teams, Sep, also not particularly happy right now with the buyout rules in the NBA. So we just saw Andre Drummond goes to the Lakers, LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin end up on the Brooklyn Nets. So small market teams are crying foul right now and saying that these buyout guys are just always going to go to the big market teams, the big cities, the teams that have, that are finals favorites. It's not really giving us a fighting chance to improve via that mechanism. So they want some sort of league change, whether it be limiting the amount of teams, how many buyout acquisitions they're able to get, maybe making it more of a lottery system as opposed to an outright, the player gets to decide where they go, an outright free agency. Do you have an issue with the way the system's currently constituted, and do you see it actually changing?
The players' union will push back against this, right, if there's any change, because they want to protect players. And this has been an issue in the league for decades. Anytime a player reached a point in his career where he'd earned enough money and went ring chasing, then they would team up with other great players. I mean, Barkley and Pippen teamed up with Olajuwon in Houston. It didn't work out, but they were all ring chasing at that point. We know Karl Malone and Gary Payton ended up with the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq. Looked like they were going to win a title. They didn't. The thing is with all of that is they were either free agents in the offseason or they got traded. This is kind of a backdoor method where the player at some point, is not happy where he's playing. The team's certainly not happy having to pay all the salary. So they want to get out from part of that. And then they have a buyout, and then that player can go where he wants to go, whether it's Drummond going to the Lakers, Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge going to Brooklyn. So obviously we just see the two best teams in basketball are loading up with all these players, which is a turnoff for the smaller market teams or the teams that aren't very good. I mean, Golden State was always in play for buyouts, right? And you can make a case that the Warriors are in a big market, right? It's San Francisco, Oakland, which is a top 10 market. So it's not as if that's Oklahoma City or anything like that. I don't think there's going to be any way that the owners can do anything about this unless they just limit it to one per team. So if you're Brooklyn, you used up your one buyout addition with Blake Griffin, you can't go get LaMarcus Aldridge. He when he gets bought out, can go to any other team but Brooklyn. Maybe that's the way they limit it. one per team.
Yeah, I think, the fans is certainly a turnoff to them. I also have seen a lot of players don't like it either. Not that the player, because for two reasons. The players are giving up money to do it, which the players don't ever like. And the union doesn't particularly like that either. You don't want to be giving up money from the millionaires to the billionaires. That's not that's not a good way to do business. It just gives the owners more power. They save money off of deals that they signed. So that's never great. It hurts other players. It also lessens the amount of money in the pot for everybody else. Also, I think that teams, as fans, players also are fans too, and they don't want to just see the same teams getting all the good players and the same teams over and over again competing for the finals. They want to see some variety in it, and they want to give themselves and their team a chance. And while it may not look like it, Aldridge is obviously past his prime. Griffin's past his prime too. Maybe a team like we were just talking about, like the Bucks, goes, man, if they just didn't add those two guys, we could actually really compete against them more realistically. And so they say, this is kind of a bullshit system where the good teams just continue to get better, and the rest of us have to just watch while they get better. So I do think that there's legitimate reasons to not like it. And as fans, I think there's a lot of reasons to not like it. As players, I get why some of them don't like it either. Not just the money aspect, but that they're trying to compete too. It seems really hard to have anything be done about it. Like you said, Sap, you don't want to restrict the players' movement if you're the union. You also don't want the players to have to give up any money. So it's a real tough balancing act. The ring chasing in general turns fans off to the player, to the team. It's like it's complicated, right? Because everybody will fault you if you don't win a ring, but they also fault you by the way you do win a ring. There's like almost no winning. You have to do it organically, which is the hardest way to do it. You have to do it by you have to be on the team that you were drafted by. They have to build around you, but they can't build around you by buying out guys. They have to do it by drafting guys and making a trade, not with a guy who demanded a trade, but a guy that you were able to just get by making shrewd decisions. So like, it's really tough to appease everybody. And I do think that, maybe the best solution, Sap, is like you said, the one per customer rule. There's no great solution to it.
We've done this in the pandemic with, toilet paper and paper towels, right? You go down the aisle and you can only buy one. So that's the limit. So the same thing with the buyout. Now, it wasn't called a buyout back years ago, but players were just getting together and going on great teams. I mean, in the 80s, the Lakers and Celtics just always added someone. I mean, Bill Walton got traded to the Celtics, won Sixth Man of the Year. I mean, just think of Bill Walton, even 80% healthy for 1 year, being the backup center. That's scary as all hell, and that's why that team is one of the greatest teams of all time. Sure, Bird, McHale, Parrish, DJ were all great. Danny Ainge was a really good player at that point. But Walton kind of put them over the top. Now you've got another guy coming off the bench who's a Hall of Famer, and he's somewhat healthy this year, and he fits in. And the Lakers went out and got Michael Thompson, who had been the first pick in the 78 draft. Well, 10 years later, he's backing up Kareem and still a very good player. Or earlier in the decade, they added Bob McAdoo. So the Lakers and Celtics, and the Sixers and Bucks to a lesser degree in the 80s, they appeared to be the only four well-run teams in the NBA. It was like the other teams were just there, and these teams were always in contention. They drafted well. They would make the right trade. It's happened throughout history in all sports, right? I mean, Tom Brady went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The only reason Rob Gronkowski came out of retirement is to play with Brady. He wasn't going anywhere else. So is he ring chasing? Yeah. That's the way it works.
Yeah, I think part of it, though, Sep, is that it's, the difference is a little bit of the timing part of it, whereas like those guys with, and this still happens, veterans will sign with a team that they think is going to be really good at the beginning of the year, right? But this is in the middle of the year, 3/4 of the way through the year, you really see who's good and who's not good. And it really looks like very obvious front running. Like, you've bid your time, you're seeing who, the Nets are in the first place in the East. I'm going to sign with them now, after 50 games have been played. And so I think that is too, fans look at that and go, man, this team's already in first place in the East, as opposed to in the beginning of the season, they're like, I think the Nets will be good, but you don't necessarily know. Everybody's at 0-0. Nets, are pulling away, and then suddenly they have Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. It's off-putting.
It almost feels like cheating, right? Like you're already the best
Yeah.
team and you're adding two former All-Stars who can still play and be a factor going down the stretch. Does some of this have to fall on the star players among the top teams? Like obviously Durant, who's played 19 games in the last 2 years, is still popular among players in the league. I think he's a pretty easy guy to play with. He's the de facto general manager of the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, is he reaching out to Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge? Because we know
Yes.
in basketball, the players are all connected and he's selling them on Brooklyn. Well, now does Giannis, as the leader of the Milwaukee Bucks, or Joel Embiid as the leader of the Philadelphia 76ers, have to do a better job of selling than they have done? And part of it may be because those are foreign players. They may not quite understand how the league works yet, whereas Durant really understands how the league works, or LeBron in LA.
Well, and those guys
they
grew
make
up
those
with the other
connections.
American players. I mean, they've known them
Right.
since they were teenagers because of AAU.
And these great foreign players are so loyal to their original franchises. That's why I think Giannis is probably going to finish his career in Brooklyn. We saw with Dirk. Dirk
Milwaukee.
was never with Milwaukee. Dirk was never leaving Dallas. Never going to happen. I think Embiid's never going to leave Philadelphia. They feel so beholden to those teams. They feel
by their
loyal
own
to those
volition,
teams.
right? They could always be traded.
Right. They could be traded, sure. But, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, their entire career with the San Antonio Spurs, they never even thought about becoming a free agent anywhere else. Tim Duncan, who's from the Virgin Islands, played around with maybe going to Orlando as a free agent with Grant Hill. That would have been a pretty interesting team, but it didn't happen. He stayed in San Antonio. Whereas the AAU guys, they're ready to move on. I mean, there are some great American players who don't feel like they want to move on. Someone like Dame Lillard, I kind of get the impression he's going to finish his career in Portland. Maybe he gets frustrated at some point and goes, I'm having an MVP caliber season and I can get by the first round, maybe. That probably gets frustrating.
You don't know who shakes loose in the NBA that way, but
you don't.
Again, yes, I think they maybe could do a better job recruiting, but I also think that because of the way that the buyout mechanism works is that, you can go through a large portion of the season before you have to buy out somebody and they're eligible for the playoff rosters. Mm-hmm. The fact that these players have a chance to see what teams they think are actually competing for a title or not gives them it makes it almost impossible to recruit them because they just are dead set on going and trying to win a championship.
Yeah, no, it does make it difficult, and innately fans will root against Brooklyn, right? Like Brooklyn's going to be looked at as the villain. So
they'll root against LA up until the finals.
Until the finals,
the same reason too.
Well, because of the 5 great players in that series, Anthony Davis is the least polarizing of those 5 great players. You've even said it that you're not a fan of LeBron, you hate Kyrie, you're turned off by Durant, you don't like Harden. I like Anthony Davis. He seems like a nice guy. He doesn't really turn me off. So you're not going to root for the Lakers because you're a Celtics fan. But someone may say, you know what? The least of all evil in this series is Anthony Davis. Now, obviously, I'm rooting for the Lakers because I'm a LeBron guy.
Right.
And you're not going to watch the finals if it's Brooklyn and LA. You're hoping it ends in a tie and the world comes to an end going into Game 7.
Yes.
So that's your best case scenario, which I always thought was going to happen, especially like in 2003 in baseball, because it looked like the Cubs were going to play the Red Sox in the World Series. They were both on the precipice of winning their respective leagues, and they both lost in dramatic fashion. And all I could say is Cubs, Red Sox, 2003 World Series, the world's going to end before Game 7, and we're never going to see a winner. And, that's what you're hoping for with Brooklyn and the Lakers. But, yeah, I think the star power will get good ratings, though. I mean, Brooklyn Lakers final will get good ratings. First of all, you're talking about the 2 biggest markets in the country, the biggest brand in the NBA, and the Lakers, the biggest star in the NBA, and LeBron James. And then you would get LeBron against Durant for a 3rd time in the finals, and the whole story of Kyrie going up against LeBron and then Harden trying to win his first title. That would be a fascinating finals. You may be turned off by it, but I think a lot of fans would look at that and say that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. What I think is going to happen is that if this sort of stuff keeps happening, I do think that the finals ratings will be really good. Mm-hmm. But the local ratings, I think, will start to go down because people will stop caring about their local team in terms of saying, well, all these great players are just going to these 2 really good teams anyways. And there's a lot less emphasis put on the regular season when you're looking at the finals and being able to telegraph it years in advance. And I think that's what the NBA would really like to avoid, is keeping some suspense, because, I mean, I've thought for basically the entire year now it's been going to be LA, Brooklyn, and I would be really shocked if it's not. And that's not a good place to be, this far out from the finals in July that will be shocked if it's not two teams that I think it's going to be.
Yeah, because we always have surprises in other sports. I mean, yep. Actually, last year was pretty cool in the bubble, but that was kind of a strange season to say the least. And you got Miami to get to the finals as a 5 seed. That was a surprise. But for the most part, the NBA is. I mean, we saw Cleveland, Golden State 4 straight years in the finals.
Yeah,
LeBron against Steph, and then Durant gets added, and the final 2 of those 4 series had Durant as the best player on Golden State. So there was no surprises there. But you know what? This has been like this for a long time, Jet. I mean, the 60s was Bill Russell against the Lakers. The 70s was the one decade where there were teams kind of floating in and out. You had Seattle for a moment. Washington won a title. Golden State won a title with Rick Barry. The 80s, it was Bird and Magic dominating with a little bit of the 76ers in there. Then the Pistons had a little run, and then Jordan dominates the 90s. And then the early 2000s, the Lakers with Shaq. And the 2010s have been dominated by LeBron and Steph, and Kevin Durant for a lesser degree. So it's always been an issue in the NBA because the one great player can have such a huge impact, more so than any other sport. We talk about quarterbacks, right? How quarterbacks are the most important position in all sports, and I think it is. But the quarterback is also dependent on the rest of his team. He better have an offensive line block for him, wide receivers catch the ball. I mean, you put LeBron James on any team, they become a contender. And that's been that way throughout his career, whether it's Cleveland, Miami, or the Lakers. He's that great. I think you put Kevin Durant on any team, they're going to be a contender, provided he plays the
and
games.
People realize that and then say, okay, and then they're getting all these guys in the buyout market and they're forcing AD to be traded to and Kevin Durant's joining up with this super team, or he's getting Kyrie to come with him, and then they're trading for James Harden. It's like, what more do they need? We already know the value of the players as individuals. It becomes less fun to see them all, congregate on the same teams. We talk about how much talent's in the NBA. You'd like it to be spread around a little bit more, where you go into the playoffs and say, man, I really don't know who's going to come out of this. And and last year was sort of like that, but the bubble played a big factor into that. And still LA, who was the favorite, still got there and still won. So, the NBA does need to walk a tightrope in that you don't want to restrict player movement, but you also want to keep fans' interest. And you're competing now with these other leagues and so many other things. The Netflixes, Hulu's. There's so much competition for eyeballs now that you want to make sure that it's the most intriguing product possible. And having the finals be fait accompli, I don't think is a good way to do that. And I think that the NBA would like to try to avoid that going forward if they can.
Unless the finals becomes epic. And you at least saw that at times in the 80s.
But I think you get that once or twice. Then there becomes fatigue on it.
There comes fatigue. And also, let's not forget the Golden State series is against LeBron were pretty one-sided except for 2016. I mean, the first time Golden State won in 6 when LeBron had Matthew Dellavedova as his best teammate, and I'm not being hyperbolic there. But the last 2, when Durant was there, as great as LeBron was in both series, he played out of his mind. The Warriors won 8 out of 9 games, and it could have probably swept both series because they were just that much better. So if now you have a Brooklyn Lakers 7-game series, that could be fascinating to watch.
It could, but then you're also talking about, you're hoping the finals are epic, but maybe the playoffs are not intriguing at all. And, Brooklyn rips through the East, the LA rips through the West. Then you're not getting great ratings or great feedback for the majority of the postseason is not the finals. It's the other rounds. So it's tough. And I'd like to see the talent spread out a little bit more. I'd like to see, what guys can do with less. I don't think a guy like LeBron necessarily needed to be with a Dwayne Wade and a Chris Bosh to win a championship, or a Kyrie Irving and a Kevin Love or a Anthony Davis. And I certainly didn't think that Steph and Kevin and Draymond and Klay Thompson needed Kevin Durant. They won a championship without him. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion. Obviously, the player movement was really started by LeBron, and he's trying to do it again. And this is something that will infuriate fans even more, is that there's rumors that he's trying to recruit Steph Curry to come and play with him on the Lakers. Does this have any realistic chance of happening, Sap?
Sure, absolutely. Because here's the scenario that could lead to this. Let's say Durant, Harden, Kyrie, win a championship. So now they've got this unbeatable big three. The Lakers would have LeBron and Anthony Davis. LeBron signed for 2 more years after this year. Steph becomes a free agent after next year in Golden State. I don't think he's going to be able to force a trade to the Lakers. But once he becomes a free agent, maybe he joins LeBron and Anthony Davis, because I don't think there's any love lost between Steph Curry and Kevin Durant at this point. So Steph Curry may say, I have to come to the rescue to make sure Durant doesn't start ripping off these titles. And Curry would want to prove to people that he was as important, if not more important, than Kevin Durant in Golden State. Now he goes to the Lakers and helps LeBron and Anthony Davis combat the big three in Brooklyn. And if Steph Curry goes to the Lakers, just book the finals of 2022 of Lakers Brooklyn, right? Because you'd have 6 of the 10 best players in the sport on 2 teams.
I think that would suck.
In a sense, it would, yeah, because the regular season would be moot. The playoffs would feel like they would be just an exercise in futility for everybody. At that point, just have the Lakers and Brooklyn play a best of 21. That might be more fascinating than a best of 7. You always felt that Steph would stay at Golden State, that he was Golden State, right? And we've seen this year that it's frustrating for him. He's been fairly healthy, and he's putting up good numbers in there, a borderline playoff team. So I think his legacy's been hurt a little bit this year. Again, he doesn't have Klay Thompson. Obviously, lost Kevin Durant a couple years ago. Wiseman, when he's played, has been effective as a rookie, but he hasn't played enough. Draymond is not what he used to be. He's still a good defender and actually a really good passer. He can't score. So I think Steph's like, this is a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Now, Klay comes back next year. Maybe that changes his mind. But do you think just adding Klay Thompson makes Golden State a championship caliber team next year?
No.
I don't. Not when you're playing
I think they've gotten too old.
They're old. That's the other part about this. I mean, they were on certainly the back 9 at that point. Klay will be coming off back-to-back seasons of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're looking to move Wiseman, and whatever pick they get this year, they'll have, if it falls out of the top 4, they get the Timberwolves pick.
Right.
If it falls out of, and then they'll have their own pick, which could be a lottery pick as well. So I think they'll be looking to package Wiseman and one or both of those picks for a more veteran player. And so they might be, if they're able to pull that off, maybe they're competitive next year. I don't know why Curry would want to sully his reputation now at this point, where he's such a well-liked player and he wasn't the one that jumped on a super team. It was Kevin Durant.
No.
And so why would he want to, at this point in his career, well, he's already accomplished so much, won MVPs, won championships already, why he would want to then hurt his reputation with fans and join LeBron, who's already the most despised player in the NBA by a lot of people, and the Lakers, which are already the most despised franchise by a lot of people.
LeBron's the most polarizing, right? Those that love him and those that hate him.
He's the most well-liked and also the least well-liked player in the NBA.
He's Howard Cosell growing up was the most loved sportscaster and the most hated sportscaster.
Yeah, he's both.
That's pretty good when you can pull that off, though, right? I mean, that's amazing. I mean, in some sense, Tom Brady's the same thing. People love Tom Brady, or people hate Tom Brady. You're really not agnostic about Brady or LeBron James. So the only thing is that maybe Curry doesn't like being on a non-contending team or being somewhat irrelevant. Steph Curry's never going to be irrelevant. He's always going to be, a leading vote getter, an all-star. It's still one of the most influential players.
But I don't think he wants to be looked at as LeBron's toady, and that's what he would become.
You don't know. At some point, he might say, again, if he despises Kevin Durant enough to say, I've got to put a stop to Durant winning a 4th or a 5th title, my best option is to go to the Lakers and play with LeBron and Anthony Davis. Then it becomes, this intergalactic war between the Lakers and Brooklyn.
Yeah, but then people, I think, start looking at him the same way they look at Durant and going, you kind of needed the help here and stuff. I don't know. I just think it would damage his reputation immensely amongst fans. And LeBron probably doesn't care at this point, but it would just continue to hurt LeBron's reputation.
Let's say Brooklyn wins the title this year and then just breeze through the way Golden State did, 3-4 years ago, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think that team is as good as the Golden State team. I think it can still blow up. Durant's not the player he was 3-4 years ago because we quite frankly haven't seen him much in the last 2 years. But let's say, for the sake of this argument, that the Brooklyn Nets win the title and go 16-4 in the postseason and win the finals in 6 games, and it's really not a series. The Lakers are going to say we've got LeBron under contract for 2 more years. We got to go all in on something, right? So what is that something? Now, how the money works, that's going to be part of it, but we'd have to see what happens at that point. They're not just going to sit back and say, you know what, Kyle Kuzma and Dennis Schroeder, those are our third and fourth best players. We hope to beat Brooklyn. They're going to need another star.
Yeah, they are, but they've kind of done this themselves in that they, cashed in everything they had to get Anthony Davis. So, and it worked. They won a championship with it, but they're not going to have that much flexibility. So they can very well say, hey, we want to add Steph Curry. It takes 2 to tango. They can't go out and acquire a player. They don't have anything to offer.
They don't have the money or the slots. No, they're in a tough predicament, and LeBron's not taking a penny less than he's worth, which people have criticized him for that. He's got plenty of money. He's a billionaire. He could cut his salary back, but he wants to get as much money as he can because someday he wants to own a team. And also, I'm always for the player getting every last dollar they can. You're the biggest star in the league. They can't pay you enough. I remember when Jordan,
not football. There's not a lot of givebacks in the NBA.
There's no givebacks because the players are mobile. That's why players sign 4-year deals. And then after the 3rd year, they're like, I want out of here. Paul George stayed in Oklahoma City and then next year said, I want out of here. I want to play in LA with Kawhi. Like, it's so different than the NFL. But now the NFL is kind of changing, right? Because Brady changed things in the NFL. Now you got like Russell Wilson talking about going elsewhere. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to end up with another team after this year. You didn't think you'd see this, but you see a lot of movement among great quarterbacks, and you see it throughout the NBA without question. But when Jordan was the best player in the league and he was the face of the league, you couldn't pay that guy enough. The Bulls should have paid him so much, and the league should have paid him. I mean, just think about what the ratings were when Jordan left in 1993. They went down like 35%. It had like the Tiger Woods effect. LeBron going to the Western Conference, we've seen the Eastern Conference ratings go down the last 3 years because LeBron's not playing in the Eastern Conference. So these are guys that you couldn't pay these guys enough. Tom Brady, the same thing, how he changes a culture of a franchise. So do I think Curry ends up going to the Lakers? Probably not, because I think Curry wants to finish in Golden State. But I also don't think he wants to be irrelevant as a 7 seed with Klay Thompson hobbled and Wiseman not developing into a player. And they don't have a lot of options either because they're kind of spent out to the max, right, with Klay and Draymond and Steph. So what are their options unless they get lucky in the draft, which is, again, that's a tough proposition.
Yeah, so we'll have to see what happens with Golden State, but LeBron seems like is just going to continue to recruit guys because he's never satisfied with his team already being really, really good because he has to be in charge of everything, which is why he's doing a movie, Sap. The trailer came out over the weekend, Space Jam 2. I have my thoughts, but you're the LeBron expert. Let's go with your thoughts first.
Well, I want to hear your thoughts first because I think I'm going to have to defend LeBron in this because I know everybody is apoplectic that he did Space Jam 2. Jordan did Space Jam, and they're like, why can't you do your own movie? Why do you have to do the similar concept that Michael Jordan did and all of this stuff? So I just want to hear why you have such a major problem with this movie, which I think if you love LeBron, you have no issue with this. If you hate him, you're going to think he's making, a mockery of whatever the hell this movie was. I mean, Space Jam was a nice, fun movie. I don't think you go to the movie theater and see basketball players acting as a work of art, although I think Kevin Garnett was really good in Hidden Gems. And maybe he's got a future as an actor. Yeah, Uncut Gems, right. It was so hidden I didn't see it. But Uncut Gems. So maybe he's got a future as an actor, and Lord knows, we got Aaron Rodgers is hosting Jeopardy. So these players want to do more than just play basketball and play football. They want to build something post-career. But what's your big issue with it?
It's not a big issue so much. It's just like I've said this about LeBron for a long time. I feel like he's never been comfortable in his own shoes, which is so weird to me. And that he's always saying, don't compare me to other on my own man and stuff like that. But he wears 23, and now he's doing Space Jam 2. Not a movie that really needed a sequel in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anybody was dying to know what the Looney Tunes were up to after the events of the original Space Jam movie. There wasn't a big cliffhanger. There wasn't, it wasn't Empire Strikes Back where there was a Luke, I am your father moment where you needed to have, some sort of resolution. So it's just I don't know why he's trying to constantly say on one foot I'm my own man, and then the other foot, put himself in this Jordan box the whole time. It seems weird to me that he is such this. He likes to think of himself as this original thinker, but he's treading on ground that has already been covered. The second part is less a LeBron thing and more about the story that it looks like, and that it looks like a 2-hour advertisement for HBO Max and Warner Brothers. Like, it doesn't seem like there's any substance there. It seems like he's just doing a really long infomercial for all the stuff that you can go watch on HBO Max. Like, because people are crazy and have the ability to do this, went through the trailer frame by frame to pick out all the like little cameos and stuff. And there's Alex DeLarge from Clockwork Orange is in there. The White Walkers from Game of Thrones are in there. The Jack Nicholson Joker is in there. Scooby-Doo is in, like, an insane amount of everything that Warner Brothers or HBO has had a part in over the past 70 years is for some reason appearing in this movie. And so it's like, it seems like just a very obvious attempt at just selling HBO Max subscriptions, which if you're going to try to sell me something, try to be a little bit more subtle about it.
So A Clockwork Orange to Space Jam 2, that's quite the connection, right? Because Clockwork Orange came out 50 years ago, 1971. It's one of my favorite films of all time.
Yes, I know.
And that's an interesting connection.
Yeah, they are sitting courtside at the big basketball game, Sap.
Is Alexander DeLarge, or Alexander the Great, the character Alexander DeLarge, played by Malcolm McDowell in just a phenomenal role. Is he in his complete white outfit? Right, with
his cronies.
Derby, with his cronies, right. So they're probably going to get thrown out of the game at some point because they're going to get rowdy.
Well, here's what
to the Korova Milk Bar. If they went to the Korova Milk Bar before the basketball game, there's going to be hell to pay at that point. So hopefully
they didn't want to put Pepe Le Pew, the cartoon skunk, in the movie because they said he promotes, rape culture or whatever stupidity people get sensitive about now. But they're perfectly willing to put the Clockwork Orange characters in the movie. That's fine.
Did they see the movie? Did they see the movie at all?
I'm starting to think they didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
Pepe Le Pew is the issue.
Yeah, but Alexander DeLarge in A Clockwork Orange was a bad man. But here's the thing. So it's a sequel, right? It's not a remake. Now, the studio wanted to do this, and they've got Ryan Coogler involved as a producer.
He's the executive producer, yeah.
He's a pretty accomplished guy, right? I mean, Black Panther.
He is many of his movies. Creed, yep.
And Fruitville Station was outstanding. Yep. That was kind of his first big hit.
He's done 3 movies, I believe. It's Creed, Fruitville Station, and Black Panther, and they've all been humongous successes.
Huge, right? So he's involved. So they wanted to do a sequel. So here's the connection I'll make. So The Godfather come out in 1972. I'm not trying to.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Space Jam and Space Jam 2 are The Godfather Part 2. No, not at all. Those are 2 of the greatest films ever made. These are just kind of popcorn, licorice soda type movies, right? We're going to go and just sit there for 2 hours and veg out. But they made The Godfather. They made a sequel, which Godfather Part 2 is really not a sequel. It's partly a sequel and partly a prequel, right? It tells you the beginning and the end. The Godfather tells you the middle. That's what makes that such a great, great film. So Marlon Brando, in the original, did not want anything to do with the sequel. Now, in the sequel, we have a young Don Corleone played by Robert De Niro. So, in my sense, Brando to De Niro feels like Jordan to LeBron.
Oh, God.
Right? The greatest of their generation. So that's the connection I'm making. But it's a sequel. It's not a remake. Someone had to be in this role if they were making it. Who better than LeBron James? Like, who else could sell this?
Well, they didn't need to make it in the first place. I think
it was wanted to make it.
No, it's his idea. He brought it to the studio. He wanted to do.
And are they going to say no to him because it's probably going to make $300 million?
No,
right?
No. I just think it's just silly. Sap, do you want to hear the log line for the movie, what it's about?
Chet, do you want him to make Hamlet? Would you like to see him do a remake
I'd rather
of
see
Hamlet?
him do something original than this.
Wuthering Heights or Taxi Driver with LeBron James or
no remakes, no remakes or sequels.
The French Connection with LeBron James as Popeye.
You loved it. You loved him in Trainwreck. That was at least an original movie.
Sensational. He was sensational in that. I mean, we're going to have LeBron James, in one of the Rocky movies, he's going to be the guy fighting Stallone, who's like 73. You're gonna
Yes.
have him as a character. Like, I don't know what you want him to do. I'm sure although I think he's limited range wise as an actor because there's not a lot of roles for 6'9" guys, to be quite honest. But
the bigger question is, Sep, why does he keep doing this to himself with Jordan?
That is a good question. Look, I would not have worn 23. He grew up idolizing Jordan. His game is nothing like Jordan.
It's also funny because Jordan couldn't care a bag of beans for him.
Well, that's why when we talked a month ago and I wrote a column about,
won't even acknowledge him.
Jordan and LeBron could maybe push that, African Americans get the vaccine. Like, there's no way in hell Jordan would do anything with LeBron James. They wouldn't do anything together. I think LeBron would love it and Jordan would push back on it. And it kind of sums up how they are as players. I mean, Jordan was the sniper. LeBron is more comfortable as a facilitator, distributor. Yeah, no, I don't. He's still trying to chase Jordan, and he's going to chase Jordan probably for the rest of his life, right? So, can he get to a 6th title? And then at that point, the argument is, I think, over at that point that he surpasses Jordan because they both have 6 titles, and LeBron would have gone to 6 more finals and dominated the numbers and the length and all of his career and all that stuff. Will he be a better owner than Jordan? But probably. It doesn't take a lot because Charlotte's not been very good with Jordan as an owner, and I think LeBron's going to own a team. Yeah, I mean, pick a different movie, sure.
But a lot of this, Sep, is like, so the media likes to make the comparison and fans like to make the comparison, and he's, sort of pushed back on it at times. But a lot of this is he's played into it with wearing the number. With,
in the powder toss before the game.
Immediately going to Nike, signing the big deal with Nike. And he wanted to be Michael Jordan. He's wanted to be Michael Jordan his whole life.
That was his favorite athlete growing up.
But no one looks more fondly on the guy who they look on the idol, not the guy who idolizes the idol.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Because like you said, Jordan couldn't care less about this.
He could not care less about LeBron James.
And unless LeBron was going to study old, video, he should have. He's a better player than Magic Johnson, but a similar type of mentality on the court. I always said that LeBron is Magic, just a way better athlete, a better rebounder, a better defender, and a better shooter. So that tells you how great he is. But that's whose game he mirrors more than Michael. And look, LeBron's part Magic, part Michael, part Karl Malone. Like, pick, all sorts of great players, and they form the perfect basketball player. Yeah, I mean, I wish he wore a different number. Now, in Miami, he wore 6 for a while.
Yeah.
Right. Was that an ode to Bill Russell, or he said he was going to win 6 titles in Miami?
Not 1, not 2.
Right. So maybe he did it that. He wore the headband for a while, which I wasn't crazy about. I think, look, he came from absolutely nothing. He's an only child. He's obviously surpassed anyone's wildest dreams, not just as a basketball player, but as a cultural figure and a leader in the community. And I agree with you. I think there's times he just doesn't feel comfortable in his own skin, and he should be. He's the best player in basketball, has been the best player in basketball for 12, 14 years. I think he's the greatest player ever. Most people put him at number 2 behind Jordan. But I think that's something that is a turnoff to people that don't like him. By him doing this, the people that don't like him, it becomes amplified, because anything he does, the people that don't like him will just get it and put it on steroids. Those who like him have to defend him.
Plus,
I try
here's
to
the
defend
thing,
him,
Sap.
but I'm not afraid to criticize him. You know that as well. I mean, I will criticize his game. I'll criticize some of the things he does. I wish he spoke out against China. I really do. I think that would have been a great look. And I think Daryl Morey was left on an island unto himself to defend, his tweets over a year ago. I wish he spoke out against China. It doesn't look good because China is worse than any country in the world when it comes to, humanitarian issues. It would have been great if the best player in the world spoke out against this country that for some reason we tiptoe around because we owe them money and we have a lot of trade with them.
Yeah, here's the thing that the original Space Jam I loved because I grew up with it, and Michael Jordan was one of my favorite players and someone I had posters of in my room growing up. The movie sucks. It's not a good movie. I just like it because it's nostalgia. This movie's going to be bad. It's not going to be a good movie. And people are going to drag him for it because the original Space Jam was bad, but everybody liked Michael Jordan. This Space Jam will be bad, and people are mad that he's even doing another one. So I just don't see how it's a win. It's like a lose-lose scenario for him.
unless he makes a ton of money, which I'm sure
Well, he's
that's
going to
a
make
factor.
money. Yeah, he'll make money.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in terms of like, no one's, I think, going to come out and say, I'm really glad he made this movie. I'm so glad this movie exists.
Is the story similar to Space Jam? Is it what the hell is it all about?
Sep,
I mean,
when LeBron
I sound
James,
like an old guy, but
when LeBron James and his son Dom are trapped in a digital space by rogue artificial intelligence, LeBron must get them home safe by leading Bugs, Lola Bunny, and the whole gang of notoriously undisciplined Looney Tunes to victory over the AI's digitalized champions on the court. A powered-up roster of professional basketball stars as you've never seen them before. It's Tunes versus Goons in the highest-stakes challenge of his life that will redefine LeBron's bond with his son and shine a light on the power of being yourself. The ready-for-action Tunes destroy convention, supercharge their unique talents, and surprise even King James by playing the game their own way. There's your log line for the movie.
There you go. Sounds interesting.
You know who's playing the artificial intelligence?
I don't know.
Don Cheadle. He must have gotten a nice payday to do this.
Oh, I'm sure, because Don Cheadle's an accomplished actor.
Yeah,
I did actually. I saw that in the credits. I'm like, wow, Don Cheadle and Ryan Coogler are involved. Like, that's pretty good. But
yeah,
obviously,
listen, there's been plenty of bad movies. I believe Al Pacino was in Jack and Jill with Adam Sandler. So it's just because you're an accomplished actor doesn't.
You want to see a bad Al Pacino movie? See Revolution, where he played a Scotsman during the Revolutionary War. Al Pacino is a Scotsman. That's like one of the worst casting measures I've ever seen, and I love Al Pacino. We both are celebrating birthdays at the end of the month. We're both April 25th. He's just 23 years older than me and much more accomplished. But wealthier. Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. I'm taller though, a little taller than my man Al. But yeah, I mean, is he making? It almost sounds like a John Ford film here, like a Western when he's trying to bring back the family together, and I don't know. It's odd, obviously. And this is coming out. Is this coming out in July?
I hope there's some cameos from some of the original Space Jam people. I know Jordan's not going to appear in it. I'm sure they approached him, and I'm sure he gave them the middle finger.
He put his cigar out in their eye when they asked him that.
He probably laughed and showed them the door very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if it's coming out in July.
He said, if you give me 100% of the gross, maybe I'll do it.
And if LeBron's not in it, I'll consider it. I would just like to see. I mean, I don't know.
How happy would have made LeBron if Jordan was in the movie? It would have made LeBron so happy. Jordan's never going to acknowledge him.
He'd be speechless. Like, I don't even know if they don't have a relationship, obviously. Maybe they will at some point. Jordan did have a relationship with Kobe. He loved Kobe. Kind of looked at him as a little brother. Because they're kind of cut from the same cloth. I mean, they're
and also I think he knew that Kobe was like 98% of him and could never be as good as he quite was.
Not quite 98%, but yeah, I would say 92%. I don't want to, split hairs there. I think Jordan doesn't think that LeBron. No, he was just a watered down version of Michael.
I do think LeBron threatens him a little bit, and that's part of the reason.
I think deep down he says, "Look at this guy, 6'9". He's a better. I mean, Jordan wouldn't say this, but maybe deep down in his reservoir, he thinks, okay, the guy's a better rebounder than me. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's a better passer. I mean, his durability is phenomenal. But this is going to be interesting to see. But it's coming.
We'll have a viewing party.
Yeah, we will. We'll all
Pick and Roll NBA podcast viewing party.
Why not? Let's get a couple of free passes from Warner Brothers. The thing is, it comes out in July, which is at the same time as the finals, right? So I wonder what is going to happen there. Like,
yeah, that's a good question. July 16th.
And the finals are slated, I think, for right around that time. So,
yeah, what's he going to do for the press? Maybe I don't know what they'll do. And that's when movie theaters everybody should be going back around that time to movie theaters.
Oh, Lord, yeah. By this July, if everyone's vaccinated, I mean, there's a lot of people that are not going back to movie theaters. There's also other ways to watch movies now than
this is going to be free if you have HBO Max too. So.
Right. Yeah. So that's going to be a part of it, which you have everything.
See. I'll watch it, Sap. I'm not going to say I'm not going to watch it. I didn't watch Uncle Drew for reasons you can probably understand. But I'll watch this one. I will. And I'm going to go into it with certainly a negative mindset, but maybe he'll surprise me.
What's the best basketball movie ever? Is it Hoosiers? I mean,
probably Hoosiers.
Probably Hoosiers. Yeah, that makes the most sense. That's not the fish that
There's
saved
a really
Pittsburgh.
good basketball movie called Glory Road that nobody really
Yes.
talks about. That is
Yep.
basically Remember the Titans, but for
Yep.
basketball.
That was good.
Except for it had more famous people because that team that won at Oklahoma A&T, or is it Texas? I don't know what they are. They are now UTEP, but whatever the heck it was
yeah.
at the point in time. First black starting 5 in college
Yep.
basketball. They played against JoJo White in Kansas
State. Yeah,
State,
JoJo
yeah.
White went to Kansas State. They beat Kentucky.
They beat Kentucky. Adolph Rupp.
Beat Kentucky.
And
Yep.
Pat Riley was on that team. Adolph Rupp was the coach.
Yep.
Great. That's a really good movie.
It is. Any guy named Adolph is probably not going to be a big supporter of an all-black starting 5.
Well, they named the arena in Kentucky after him.
Yeah, exactly. It holds like 22,000 people. Another great basketball movie, White Men Can't Jump.
You know what? We'll do a podcast on the best basketball movies.
We'll
when this comes right around when this comes out, we'll do one of the best basketball movies will be.
All right, sounds good to me. We've got a plan for that. That sounds good.
All right. Good to have a plan for a few months in advance.
It'll be during the finals, and LeBron will be, working
It'll be
on
nothing,
championship
no
number
news
5.
during the finals. We don't have to focus on that at all.
No, not at all.
In fact, I'd much rather do a best basketball movies during that time as opposed to what I believe the finals will be at that time. So that will be the duration of our program today for the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure to check out our podcast on fullpresscoverage.com. Make sure you check it out on my YouTube page, jetstryer.com/ nope, that's wrong. YouTube.com/jetstryer. Jeez, I did it the other way around. YouTube.com/jetstryer. I'm on Twitter at jetstryer. Sap's on Twitter at JohnSap25. We always tweet out the links to the show so you can listen there, or you can watch us on YouTube if you want to see our faces instead. Lots of ways for you to watch, listen, engage. Be sure to, if you watch on YouTube, thumbs up and subscribe. If you listen somewhere else, comment. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you want us to talk about. And we will be back later in the week with some more basketball content for you, as I'm sure the league will have plenty of more stories. Hopefully no new sequels to Space Jam, though. All right, everybody. See ya.